Good afternoon and welcome to Community Development Grant, Block Grant, special meeting of June 27th. Roll call, please.
Committee members Cornell. Oganessian is absent. Olivares.
Here.
Sinanian is absent. Chair Markarian.
Yes. Next.
The agenda for the June 27, 2012 meeting of the CDBG Advisory Committee was posted on Friday, June 22, 2012 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Item 2 is minutes. At A, approval of the minutes of the October 14, 2011, February 17, 2012, February 22, 2012, and February 28, 2012 CDBG Advisory Committee meetings. I did want to point out that we don't have at least 3 members that were present at the February meetings. So we're probably going to need to hold off on those, but the October minute we could probably move forward with.
Okay.
Should we take a motion on the October minutes, or?
Yes.
Okay, I move to approve the October minutes for the committee.
And I second that.
And we need a second. Committee members Cornell. Oganessian is absent. Olivares.
Yes.
Sinanian is absent. Chair Markarian.
Yes.
Item 3, reports. At A, receive report regarding results of May 1st, 2012 City Council Housing Authority meeting.
Do we have a report on that?
Yes, thank you. I did want to report just briefly on the meeting of the May 1st City Council meeting. First of all, Jess Duran obviously is not in today, so I'll be filling in for him. If remember, the May 1st meeting was to approve the CDBG Advisory Committee's recommendations for the 12-13 block grant program for social services and capital programs. These were the projects that you all reviewed and deliberated for a whole day. We did let the council know that there was certainly a significant cut of 35% overall from the funding, so it was very challenging for the committee to make decisions, and it was some very difficult decisions, including some projects, programs not getting funded. But nonetheless, there were several comments, and I'll just kind of be in general as far as what council mentioned. There was some comments, of course, why not cut the entire agencies 35% across the board, and you know, I know we discussed that as well. It wouldn't make sense for some projects to be cut 35% because that would really make some significant difference in their program. There was discussion about the public input on the public hearing. We did have a number of people there. We had over 40 people there. They did mention if the committee was there, and of course it's a public hearing for the citizens to be involved with, not necessarily a committee meeting, but they did state that certainly like to have committee members there to be present at those meetings so that they hear what the citizens are also saying about the funding recommendations or the comments on the plan. Other than that, there were some other basic general questions about some of the programs and their funding levels. By and large, one of the more large members attending was from the Armenian Relief Society for the Community Outreach Program. We had over, I believe, 40 persons in attendance. Certainly discussing the fact that they did receive a funding cut from the city, and they were looking for funding to help cover some of their costs. There was a number of 5 other agencies speaking as well, including CASP, ARC, a number of other agencies discussing whether they received cuts or not, or they were in favor of the funding that they received and appreciate the funding. So overall, it was a meeting where they did have some discussions on revising some of the recommendations. Lastly, there was also some fun discussion by council members about the city programs, again competing against the nonprofit programs. Again, certainly we've heard that comment before, and we know that there's certainly always discussion at the committee level and advisory and the council level discuss how funds are procured for city and nonprofit programs. There was a motion to provide some additional funding for ARS and I believe CAS and ARC to take some funds from some existing recommended projects such as seniors and youth to these other programs. The motion failed, so basically the funding plan was submitted and approved as is. And we did get comments certainly from the council that the committee did a great job in deliberating and making very hard decisions on the projects and the programs, knowing that we had a significant 35% cut, and we knew that agencies, unfortunately, will not be all happy with the decisions. But again, staff certainly has told the committee that these are decisions that have to be made. There is less money, and we do have to make some significant cuts this year and possibly in the future as well. So it's a chance for the agencies to begin to look at other sources of funds, private funds, fundraising to match those CDBG funds that are being cut. So in general, they did approve everything, and the programs are going as is. So that's pretty much the gist of it for the council meeting.
Thank you, Moses. And if I can go back and refresh everyone's memory, it was a very difficult day. We spent close to 11, 12 hours, and difficult decisions were made, and unfortunately we had to cut some fundings. We weren't happy. We didn't want to do that, but unfortunately we only had, it's amazing. We had budget for $296,000 in funds, and the requested amount was $1,039,000. So it was a huge gap. So we had to definitely cut and reduce the fundings for some of these organizations, but that was our recommendations, and I remember the council also spent a considerable amount of time to go over our recommendations, and they finally approved it. But we regret to see some of these fundings really affecting some of these organizations. So, any other comments?
I want to say a couple of things. First of all, I wasn't part of this decision-making process this year due to personal reasons, but I fully supported what the committee did because I did keep up with it. I did take a bit of an issue. The three members that are here were there at the council meeting when our or your decisions were being questioned. I frankly felt like some of the comments made directly indicated that some of the persons that were making the comments really did not study the proposals as well as we did. I don't think they ever do. So I took a bit of an issue with that. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that they supported what we did, or what the committee did, and I was 100% behind it. I think the three of us were there. I saw the frustration on your face, and we talked about it. But I think overall, in the last 2-3 years, every time the committee has put forth proposals, at the end of the day, they support what we do. And it is really sad that we have to cut so many programs that are good. I mean, today we're talking about Club Jam, closing the doors. And where are these kids today? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a sad part. So it's a personal thing for me, always has been, but I support the committee. So thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Next item is item 3B, receive report regarding summary of third quarter performance reports for fiscal year 2011-2012 CDBG social service programs.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, we put together a spreadsheet of the agencies and their third quarter performance report, again, as of March 30th. We haven't received final reports for June 30th, so we do only have the third quarter reports. From our review, it's pretty much on par for meeting the year-end requirements of serving 100% of their goals. Some have already surpassed those goals. Some are just there, but majority of programs are meeting their goals, their numbers, their services, their expenditure rates. We do have some agencies, including the city, that spends money at the end of the program year, third and fourth quarter. So that's common for a lot of youth programs that start in September and go 9 months. So they then tend to spend at the end of the year. But by and large, we do not have any agencies this year with having difficulties managing the programs or meeting their outcomes. Of course, we know that an example being Club Jam, that they have returned their grant because of they're not able to meet with the funding they have, unfortunately, with other cutbacks, including some of their own private sources. not able to meet those needs. But by and large, they did complete their program, and we'll see I know with the funding cut, that really cuts down the number of persons served, but there's not much we can do at this point until we get our funding slowly back from HUD. But this will give you an idea of who's performing, who's met their goals, and expending funds, which is we all want them to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I reviewed, and I think all the organizations are meeting their goals for the annual goal. Okay. Any comments? Next item.
Item 3C, receive report regarding status of CDBG capital improvement projects.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I also gave you another sheet which would have the status of the current capital projects, the CDBG capital improvement projects, and these are also prior year projects, programs. We did, again, have a number of projects that just started construction or started their bidding process, and it's good to have all the nonprofit projects already in that stage by the end of the year, already bidding out their projects. The hospital, Adventist Hospital, medical center is out to bid, and Home Annetment, the Harmony Society has gone out to bid. So all of our projects are getting out there, Door of Hope. So we've actually did some progress. I think we're going to be very busy this summer with all the projects kind of going out at the same time, but that's okay. We want to keep busy and want to keep these projects moving. We don't have any CIP projects from the nonprofit side or the city side that are going to return funds. Probably, from our estimates, that there probably is going to be some funding gaps that the agencies may need to meet, or we may need to reduce the scope a little bit more. What's different from your normal private funding is that government funds and the rates for projects always remain high regardless of the economy. It doesn't change. Your wage rates doesn't come down as a result of the economy because they are flat prevailing union rates, so they stay significantly higher than private wages. So materials continue to go up. So we do see some challenges in the next year in making sure we adequately fund the nonprofit projects, because we're seeing costs go up, and agencies have to pick up some more of that funding. The city projects as well, a number of park projects such as Maryland, which was an older project, is out to bid. We have Carr Park, which is a park down in Colorado by the 2 freeway, who's currently out to bid. They'll be ending their bids, I believe, in late July. So there's a number of projects that we're going to have, hopefully some groundbreaking, hopefully some good shovel-ready projects to go, and I think it's going to be a very good year. We have the Essentia project, which is the emergency shelter, under construction, and I think that one is ready to go by the end of the year. So it'll be actually a very good and exciting time to have all these projects completed with funding that we were able to allocate prior year before all the funding cuts. So I think it lends well to the committee's decisions to fund projects that were ready to go and maximize the funds that were available. So.
Okay. Yes.
Were any of these projects leveraged with redevelopment funds?
Good question.
I think.
Advisory Committee, Olivares, no, there was not any projects that I know of. I was thinking the park, I know nonprofits are not, but I was thinking park projects. No, they're after the redevelopment funds. And
so the funding was in place, and that's not getting affected?
Yes, it's not impacted by the redevelopment funds.
Next item, please.
Item 3D, receive report regarding the Glendale homeless count.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the CDBG Advisory Committee staff, Yvette Sanvalian, Homeless Coordinator for the City of Glendale. I believe you have a short summary of the homeless count in front of you, but I will give you a brief information. If anyone is interested in accessing the full report regarding the 2012 Homeless Continuum of Care count report, is available on our website. But the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, as part of the requirement for all local jurisdictions who receive funding from federal department to continue the homeless continuum of care programs are required to complete an annual count. City of Glendale does complete an annual count, and the count is supported through the volunteers of the City of Glendale, congregations, local nonprofit agencies who do provide homeless services in Glendale. The count in terms of City of Glendale is meant to answer pretty much how many homeless folks are in the City of Glendale on any given night in terms of the program. For the requirements of HUD, local jurisdictions are to select one day in the last week of January as their point in time. And what happens during that one day, folks around the community walk through the streets of Glendale, emergency shelters, hospitals, congregations, all services, and conduct a survey of homeless clients. The count for us was January 25th, 2012. On that date, we have identified 299 unduplicated homeless persons within the City of Glendale. These are unduplicated persons who are residing in, on the streets, emergency shelters, ER, hospitals, places that are not meant for human habitation, and they are counted as homeless individuals. In terms of some of the characteristics, actually, going back to 299 from 2012, in 2011 we had 412 homeless individuals. There was a bit of drop in terms of the homeless individuals within City of Glendale for this year, and there were a couple of major factors associated to that. One is that the regional winter shelter, which was funded through Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, LAHSA, that would operate during the winter seasons, out of the Armory, typically served about 150 to about 180 homeless individuals, and some of the clients would be from the nearby community. This year, if you recall the report, Glendale operated a small homeless solutions project which targeted local homeless clients within the City of Glendale and served about 50 unduplicated persons through that project. That was one of the major changes in terms of the total number. The second reason was that last year, City of Glendale, along with Ascensia, participated in the 100,000 Homes campaign, which was a campaign Glendale joined to basically work with clients who are on the streets to get them, quickly into housing. And Ascensia had committed serving about 10 chronically homeless individuals, and they served about 20 chronic homeless individuals, getting them from the streets into housing with collaboration with the hospitals and various nonprofit agencies, and obviously affordable housing, landlords who provided affordable housing for those folks. The other difference in terms of the population was that the last 2 years we also had the homeless prevention funding that typically was used to prevent homelessness in the City of Glendale, and that funding served over 120 unduplicated households, so to prevent homelessness as a result, they weren't homeless at the time of the count. But in terms of population characteristics, we had 94 persons of the 299 who actually are Glendale residents, and they became homeless in the City of Glendale. 169 or 57% of those had ties to Glendale, either worked here in the past or had family in Glendale, so they weren't living or became homeless in the City of Glendale. However, they are counted within the Glendale's count because at the time of the count they are in our city jurisdiction, and they are accessing services from our continuum of care programs. Of the 299 folks, we had 129 identified individuals, and 134 were persons in families. And the persons in our families are typically staying in the emergency shelter program offered through YWCA, Ascensia's emergency shelter, Door of Hope, Salvation Army, transitional housing programs. One of the major factors that HUD considers really critical and is now targeting a lot of the funding is veterans, along with the folks that are chronically homeless. Basically, 107 of the 299 folks were identified as chronically homeless. And though the definition for HUD is of the person who's chronically homeless is if a person is unaccompanied person and has been homeless for at least more than a year in Glendale and has a disabling condition. So there's a specific criteria. And typically HUD is identifying priority funding for chronically homeless because they're more they're on the streets and in need of supportive services and need to be connected to mainstream resources. A couple of the changes within this year from last year is that we saw an increase in the senior population of homeless folks. We had identified 22% seniors for 2012, and that compares to 67 persons 2012, and it compares to 27 persons in 2011. So significant amount of homeless that were seniors were identified this year. And factors related to that was, cut in their fixed income and or loss of a spouse that typically was the supporting that family composition. The count is typically used to substantiate the need for our funding application through HUD, which is an annual competition that City of Glendale applies. We typically apply about $2.4 million and a new project. If City of Glendale is able to identify gaps in the services and has the needs substantiated, then we're able to apply for new permanent housing and have been successful in getting those funds in the continuum. And usually this is the county is used to develop local and county-wide programs, and this is also used as a tool to end chronic homelessness and end veterans homelessness by government deadline of 2015 in terms of veterans. A positive note to end on the report is that the City of Glendale counted about 14 homeless veterans in the City of Glendale, which is significantly less from last year. Of those 14, only 1%, so 5 were Glendale veterans, homeless in Glendale, and so we did receive a new funding through federal government, which will take effect in September, and that will be targeted for the 5 veterans that are on the streets that will be placed in permanent housing by September. So this concludes my report. If you have any questions, I can answer them now. If you wish to access the full report and comparisons between 2012 and 11 and historical data, the report is available on our parks website at www.ci.glendale.ca.us.
Thank you, Yvette. Any comments?
One question.
Questions?
Just a general question. I would imagine that the services that the City of Glendale provides compared to other cities, and if you're a homeless person, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but if you know that Glendale provides certain services and they have certain funding, are you likely to go to Glendale versus some other city? So in a year when the funding goes down, see a reduction in homeless in the city. It's an opinion, but would you say it's reflective of the fact that there are enough funds here?
Well, typically, homeless clients do access services wherever they are available. So in the event that there is a reduction in Glendale homeless, we do serve anyone who is homeless in our community. As far as funding cuts, the homeless continuum of care funding is increasing in terms of homeless services, but it's targeting for specific target population, the veterans, the chronic homeless, or now with our homeless continuum of care, we're moving into rapid rehousing and prevention. That's how the funding is now going to be realigned and reallocated in the next year. I hope that I answered your question.
Thank you.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes, I saw your figures here, and I know the outstanding job you do, but the figure looks too good compared to last year. Have you revised your accounting to some extent, or you have a new accounting format on this? Because this is a significant drop from what we had last year at this time. So I just wanted to see if this is really the right figures, or you had a new accounting change on your figures here.
The methodology stays the same. The significant change for this year's count, as I mentioned, is that during this December 1st through March 15th, LAHSA, which is the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, operates a winter shelter program at our armory. And that armory is typically a hypothermia program that is drop-in shelter for anyone who's currently homeless and needs a cot and a meal for the night, and then can come into that program. That program is not designated specifically for Glendale folks. It's just open county-wide. And when we had that program in 2011, we served during the point in time count in 2011, we had 168 unduplicated persons at the Armory on that night, versus 50 persons from the local program that we did in 2012. So what we did this year is that instead of participating through LASA's program, through the regional winter shelter, Council had directed us to work on a smaller pilot project to focus on Glendale, Burbank clients in our community. And the Homeless Solution Project, which still operated out of the Armory, only targeted 50 local homeless clients. So our clients who were participants at the winter shelter last year also participated this year. However, the program that we had this year gave a priority to Glendale Burbank and only had a bed capacity of 50. Therefore, anybody else who would migrate or come to Glendale for accessing homeless services, we were referring them to other shelters that are available in Sylmar, Santa Clarita, Pasadena, or back to Los Angeles, any other homeless services, because ours had a specific program entry requirements. It wasn't a drop-in shelter. That was the significant change. Having 150 homeless clients on one night at the Armory versus 50 clients this current year. But the methodology is still the same. We walk the streets from 8 a.m. to about midnight. Community policing supports the efforts, volunteers, all the staff to conduct a survey, and then it's unduplicated at the end of for the purpose of the report.
So this new format is mostly solo by the city then, instead of involving Burbank with us?
The homeless count, we're only supposed to count in the city of Glendale. So we did count in the city of Glendale. The project that I mentioned is a collaborative project with City of Burbank that just ended March 15th. And that was a pilot project that in lieu of the regional winter shelter, we did the Homeless Solutions project in lieu of the regional winter shelter. And that project is now completed. And LASA will be issuing their RFP for the regional winter shelter program, and we'll see what happens what directions we'll get from City Council. We will go to City Council next month to give an update on the Homeless Solutions project and the homeless count, and request direction how to proceed with the regional winter shelter RFP.
Two figures impressed me here when I was reading your report here on this, and that was the veterans. Maybe you can tell me what increase that is from last year, and also the families. When we made our tour, I saw that you have in certain locations and facilities that you have families set aside, but it seems like compared to last year that you have an increase of families now that are on the deep end here, along with the individuals. So to me, if you don't have enough facilities that you can keep the families together, I take it then you have to separate them then, so that they're separated in the men's children instead of on the family side?
No. So we do have transitional housing programs that are dedicated for single women who are domestic violence survivors with their children. And then we have other transitional housing programs that's for, both parents or single dad or single mom. We never separate the family composition in terms of homeless services. We do find an alternate program if the family doesn't meet the program requirements. In terms of families, number of families increasing, I think last year we were looking at a large number of denominators, versus this year. So we had reported 134 persons in families this year versus 117. So it's not that, it's still a little bit increased, but not to that extent as it was in the past. What we are trying to do now is shorten the length of stay from our transitional housings from 24 months to 1 year so that we can graduate families quickly, so that more available beds are available for existing families. And also we're trying to target our current funding for rapid rehousing and prevention. So we would, prevent homelessness before the family becomes homeless, and or if they have become homeless, and we can rapidly house them through another unit before they get into the shelter systems. And that's the priority in terms of families. And then for veterans, it did decrease from 38 to 14 from 2011 to 2012. Again, that's because Astencia's efforts with the 100,000 Home campaign did target the homeless veterans in Glendale, and also we received the additional subsidy from federal government for about 5 vouchers for 5 veterans. So every year we're able to serve 5 additional veterans because the funds are targeted for the chronic homeless veterans. So that's targeted efforts for specific population.
When you say 5 vouchers for veterans, what dollars are we talking about?
167,000 is for 5 years, which includes rental subsidy for the veterans ongoing, as well as intensive case management. So the portion of case management position, and the veterans are basically connected back to services. They are expected to work if they can, access mainstream resources. They, improve their health conditions as part of being a participant in that program.
So you get a grant for 160 more or less $1,000 for 5
5
veterans
years.
over 5 years.
That's correct.
So next year you might get the same thing
Right.
for an additional 5 veterans for 5 years.
That's correct.
Cannot duplicate those, correct?
No, we cannot. And typically, it depends on HUD's priorities, and it depends on our needs assessment. We may next year, if HUD allows, apply for family vouchers, for example, or folks with mental illness. Depending on HUD's priorities and our needs assessment that we're able to substantiate, we're able to apply for new funding. And the reason why we're able to compete and get that additional funding is because the nonprofit agencies really do a good job and meet their outcomes and serve the clients really well in terms of the services, and so we're able to score high enough to get a new project.
Thank you.
Just one follow-up, Yvette, on the veterans. We have a mayor that's very passionate about the veterans, being a Vietnam veteran himself. So, I share that here. And we just can't do enough for these people, especially if they're on hard times like this. So I'm happy to see a report on this that they are given, right up there and given priority. Your winter program coming up, is that going to be comparable to, on the smaller scale, that you had last year?
The program that will be funded through LASA, they issued the RFP last month, and the proposals are due end of this month. So at this time, we don't have enough information to share with the committee. If we do have a local agency that can apply through the funding, they can participate through LASA's application process. And if they get funded, they can serve up to 150 or a set of number of homeless persons. So the homeless count is just one day that particular date. That doesn't necessarily mean that you may or may not count some other folks that are currently homeless who may not be in the city of Glendale. It's just the start point in identifying how many possible homeless clients we have in Glendale. And again, HUD has specific criteria who gets counted, who doesn't get counted. So it's not the best method or approach, but it is what we are. We are mandated to do this on a biannual basis. We do this annually just to have comparable statistics and see how best we can target our funding to meet the gaps of those, the needs of the community.
Nice job.
Thank you. Yvette, I just have one quick question. You mentioned homeless prevention funding that we received for 2012, or was it 2011?
The homeless prevention funding came out in 2009. It actually
Okay.
completed June of 2012.
Now, do you think we will receive another one, or can we apply? I mean, you just mentioned that there is an increase in homeless count in seniors, and why not prevent? If we can, prevent before they become homeless, how can we, meet the requirements to receive more funding for prevention? That's what I'm all for, prevention before it gets to, the problem?
We did receive a little bit of increase under our emergency solutions grant. That's not even significant enough. As we did in 2009, we received about $1.3 million in 2009, and in 2012 we received about $80,000 increase. So we are targeting all of the available resources to prevention, whether it's seniors, families, or unaccompanied individuals. The challenge with some of the funding criteria that's issued with HUD is that it has specific requirements. Folks have to get employment within 30 days. They have to participate in X, Y, and Z. And it's really challenging to find someone who's on fixed income and employment, especially a senior or someone who has special needs. So depending on the available funds, we will target those funding with our seniors. However, we do have to work really closely with all the available senior resources, the meals program, the case management, to prevent and to continue working, providing the services for all those that are at need.
Thank you so much. Great job.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item, please.
Item 3E, receive report regarding status of fiscal year 2013-14 federal HUD budget.
All right, let's hear that.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I did provide you a program planning schedule for the fiscal year 13-14. That's again July 1st, 13-14 next year, which is the action plan for our funding for next year. You know what? I'm sorry. Did I?
Different item.
Which one are we in the?
We're on 3E.
I'm sorry, that's the federal budget. I'm sorry, jumping ahead. Part of that process is that we do have the federal budget under review right now. That's the HUD budget for the appropriations for 13-14. And that budget is currently, actually, as we speak, under the full House congressional representatives are actually making the votes either today or tomorrow. They're voting on a bill that would, for us, and it's actually good news, would provide some at least level funding for next year, which means they don't have any significant cuts in the bill right now to cut as they did last year. So we're actually hopeful that the bill will survive the process and fund block grant programs and the housing programs at least the same level as the current year and not make any further cuts. There's a slight increase of 3 to 4% in the budget, but that might get washed away. But right now, as we speak, they are in Congress, and we have actually notified our congressional representative, Adam Schiff, in support of the funding for block grants and our housing programs for fiscal year 13-14. We will know more about this tomorrow when the House representatives make their final votes, and then from then on, it's also the Senate who's also needs to vote on this as well. So,
You know who proposed the bill?
well, the bill comes out of the Appropriations Committee. There's a committee, just as the Advisory Committee meets here. There's a committee who meets and makes the decisions how much money should the HUD programs get, and from the HUD programs, how much should Section 8 get, how much should CDBG get, how much housing, how much homeless funds, and that's how they divvy up those funds, very much like the committee here. Then the Appropriations Committee makes that recommendation to the full House of Representatives, which is today and tomorrow, and they begin to, as we have the Council make their suggestions, they make their suggestions or amendments. That's the process they do at the House level. So it's a committee level, and the committee at this point did recommend some slight increases in the block grant program. The city, Glendale, did do a very substantial effort with all the other cities in LA County, and actually Southern California, to inform our congressional leaders and congressmen from each city to support CDBG. This was an effort by the city in conjunction with our community agencies as well, sending letters, making phone calls to the committee, to the congressman's office to support CDBG and Holman. And by and large, it seems that it made a little bit of a difference there to keep funding at its
At the same level.
at its same level, not a significant cut as before. So we're hopeful that this will make it through the year and through the election, and we'll have our funding for next year.
All right. Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Crowley. All this is preliminary. Have an election year on November 4th, all this could change. especially if a new administration is incoming. So everything to me is right up in cloud nine until after November 4th.
Yes, Mr. Cornell, yes, yeah, it is true that the election does make a significant difference in the appropriations, but by and large, from what we've seen in the committee levels at least, and the CDBG program is really a CDBG program mainly, and the homeless programs are really a bipartisan program that both sides do support, and we did see that even the House, which is more conservative, did support the CDBG from the Appropriations Committee. So hopefully this will withstand, I mean, I'm being positive here, but hopefully it will stand the election and the process, but we'll know more after November when this is all said and done, and then we can kind of go from there. But our projections right now, just for planning purposes, to have the same amount of funding as last year, well, this current year coming up.
You have a new fiscal budget that takes effect, what, October 1st?
The federal fiscal year is October 1st.
So even if this is in place and you get your figures from HUD, there's a good possibility that those figures could be modified if a new administration comes in.
Well, the modification could also be increased. Let's not be negative, or at least hope for the best. Okay. Next item.
Next item is 4A, under action items, review and approve 2012-13 program planning calendar and needs assessment for fiscal year 2013-14 action plan.
Okay, now I'm in the right place
Okay.
here. Okay. I was excited because today we had our Kings celebration. As you saw the Stanley Cup come to the city of Glendale, and I got to touch the cup today. I was actually touching the cup, so that's very exciting today. So Glendale is...
You must be a hockey fan, huh?
Oh, I'm a hockey fan from years ago. But the program planning schedule, which you have, is for the fiscal year 2013, which we just discussed. Funding is right now proceeding as is, but we'll know more later on in the year about the actual funding amount. But I do want to just make just for information, the unfortunate part of the 35% funding cut, 15% the year before, which is over 50% of our block grant program has been cut over 2 years. With that in mind, unfortunately, our administration funding has also been cut, and we did have some staff reductions. And unfortunately, one of the things I know we talked about was that we need to kind of scale back a little bit of the advisory committees, some of the activities, and not necessarily the meetings, but one of the meetings, we usually go to cruise night and do surveys to get some community impact. We're not able to do that because of staffing levels. We do have, I think, 1 or 2 less advisory committee meetings. The site visits have been cut back. We probably will not be doing any site visits this year because of the staffing levels. Not very significant items. We do actually intend to do, instead, we intend to do a little bit more monitoring of the agencies. So we'll do a technical site visit for staff. And of course, we also will discuss as the advisory committee is welcome to come with us when we do those visits in November, to come with us to when we do a monitoring or a site visit with staff, but it won't be the 5 or so, 6 per day. So you actually could pick and choose which agency you'd like to come and visit along with staff, and we'll be reviewing some of their financial records, some of their program records, so we know that they're getting, especially sometimes the staff, there's turnover in the nonprofits, and so we want to make sure that they're getting the necessary technical assistance that we want them to succeed. So we did cut back on site visits, but we are doing the technical assistance and those site visits with staff. And again, the committee is welcome to come as well. Instead of cruise night and surveys, we'll be doing the review of the census data. We actually now have the 2010 census data now online, and it's available at the census tract level, which is kind of a smaller level than the city, which will give us an opportunity to study what are the trends now. Do we see in certain areas of a higher poverty level or lesser poverty level? Are there different demographic changes, housing changes? So it's really an opportunity for staff to really see the difference in the last 10 years of what has occurred in Glendale. We know there's been a population decrease, but it may not be necessarily in communities which most of our funds are in southern Glendale. So it'll be good to see where population drops have been, we know for another fact that the population is aging. The median age has gone up for Glendale. We know that certain census tracts have significant amount of seniors, and actually there was one census tract which I believe is close to here, which is on I believe on Harvard and Glendale Avenue and Brand. Their population overall for that area is 25% over 65 years and older. It's almost a quarter of the population is 65 and over, which is very significant percentage-wise. So we're looking at those kind of demographic changes instead of the data we get from the citizens and so on. And again, we will have a public hearing to get the input from the residents when we do our meetings with the community. But by and large, a lot will be in the office with reviewing of data because of staffing and not being able to get out as much as we like. We will continue to be out there, but with the loss of some staff, we will essentially be doing a lot of data analysis and review of the census, which is actually what should be doing now that the census is out, 2010 census. So we'll give the committee a report, I believe, in October when we have our next meeting after July to review all the needs assessment data and see how this might change some of the priorities. It might change some of the strategies. It might, or it might not. I don't know. I mean, we're anxious to see the data as well from our perspective. So, but by and large, the plan schedule is the same. We do have dates here highlighted for the meetings, and I do want to make sure that the committee does review this so that you can pencil in these dates now. Next one is July 25th and October 11th, so that you have those dates set aside for those meetings. The big meetings, of course, are still the full days in February. So those will continue unless we make changes. We'll continue with that schedule. We expect to go to council in April of next year with the recommendation. So we're starting over again. This is a new process. We just finished through some very challenging times, and we're back again. So.
And again, the applications, the deadline would be sometimes in November. Maybe can we announce that? Right.
That's correct. The applications will go on November, I believe, November 16th, 2012, and they will be due on December 20th. 2012, so there is time for agencies to contact the department and get some technical assistance. We again are not changing anything significantly from previous years. It's just some different targeting of the census data versus some outreach. So I just kind of want to make sure that when we report that it's the data we're really looking at this year, which will be the only year because we don't need to look at the data next year. But this year is very important because it's brand new, and we want to see the demographic changes. And I'm sure the committee would like to see what changes there are as well.
I think at the council meeting, I remember one of the council members asked about transferring funds from pre-designated, or at least allocating a little more, taking more, and designating to social services. Would that be a possibility? I mean, they were willing to take a look at some of the pre-designated projects and see that any possibility to allocate some of the funds to, of course that has to go through the council for sure, but any possibility for that, just to increase a tad on the social services?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, yes, there's two categories which I believe they mentioned was certainly the capital projects are pre-designated, and those are council priorities that they have made, for example, parks, and I'm sure that further projects like code enforcement, economic development would remain priorities. It's kind of the direction we need to get from council as far as those kind of shifting of allocations. We do know with this, the cut that we have, there'll be far less funds to have for any major capital
But the
projects.
social services were
But
most
social-
affected
Yes,
by
the
these
social
cuts.
services are mostly affected, and Madam Chair, yeah, they did mention I think I discussed this earlier as well, that they were looking at, I know one particular committee, council member mentioned that they'd like to see maybe some more of the city funds picked up by the general fund, and those social service CDBG funds would be allocated to the nonprofit community agencies. That was certainly a comment made by several council members to, not sure, there's no particular percentage that we use, but it's a competitive basis, whether it's, again, the city program, it's really now, I think it's more based on the needs. So there was that discussion, which I think, at our next meetings that are coming up, probably in October, will be something that the committee will need to, again, look at and recommend. By then, we should know a little bit more about the funding levels, possibly, except for November 4th, when that might change. But that's still something that the committee can make recommendations on, that social service money.
If I may, I've always held the opinion, and I still do today, that CDBG funds come from the federal government to the city, and everybody should be able to compete on a level playing field. When funds are pre-designated because a council member has a particular interest in a project, I don't share that opinion. So, that to me, that project should be able to come in front of us, who spend a lot of time analyzing the specifics of projects, and make a decision as to whether that's a viable project. And if it is, then it should be funded. So I personally would like to get a message across to the council that, pre-designated funds need to be re-looked at and not be so easily taken away. At the same time, all these agencies over the last 2-3 years with the 50% cut that we have to deal with, the city didn't cut any other funds on their projects. The pool project didn't get cut on its CDBG funding. They held the same. They still had the funds. So, to me, that's a bit of a problem that I think needs to be looked at by. We don't make we make recommendations. We don't make the final decision, but we do have opinions about how things should be done, and that's my opinion. And so, I would like to somehow get that message across to the council.
Again, look at the census. You mentioned that they increased seniors. We need to increase social service programs for seniors. If you're increasing the number of seniors, so there should be appropriate programs for them, especially with possible closure of some of these adult daycare centers. We will have, seniors out there who would need assistance in different programs. So I'm looking forward to having more funding for the social programs.
Yeah, I had something I want to follow up with Mr. Oliveris mentioned, and I'm on this accord, and it's not once, twice. I think we brought this up about on 3 occasions, and especially with the tight squeeze that we're in now due to the economic situation. It's not going to get any better in the near term. And I'd like to see if you can propose to council that we can have, as they have in other committees, like the Housing Authority, like the Water and Power, where they have joint commissions, where possibly we can be privileged and have an occasion like that, where we can air our views to make sure that they're heard. Because I don't think the council would be against it per se, as long as they see and hear the side, our side, because we're the nuts and bolts that the people, as in the council meeting, when this is heard in May, point their finger to. And as a result, I'd like to have maybe a joint meeting. I think it can be productive, and it's worth a pilot program to try it out, and we can go from there. And but I think it'd be a good start if we can start in that facet here. I have a question here in regard to your action plan. Last time when we had the review and going over this here. We had, if I remember correctly, 3, maybe 4 social vendors. I think there's one on the CIP that did not make the mandatory technical assistance here. Now I see, according to the action plan, you've cut this down to only 1. I'd like to see that reinstated to 2. You have one on the 21st November. I'd like to see perhaps if you can sandwich another one in on November 28th, because it's a hardship. If someone can't make it on the first day, that they have an option to still be in compliance and still make the secondary workshop. So I'd like to see if you can sandwich it in before our next meeting of July 25th, so that that could be worked in for a second workshop for November 28th.
Mr. Cornell, members of the committee, I forgot to mention that critical part too. The reason why we did this action was exactly what Mr. Cornell mentioned. We do have agencies that do not attend the mandatory, and sometimes they think, well, then I can just go to the secondary one and not catch everything, but I'll catch a mini version. And that doesn't work. As you'll see, sometimes when we get the applications, they're incomplete. We want to make a very strong effort to have one meeting for everybody to attend and hear the same message, complete message, versus a second kind of voluntary, and they'll come in and pick up the forms. I think for us, it's more important to have everybody there, like you said, Mr. Cornell, and not have anybody, no excuse not to come there. Everybody can make it. There shouldn't be an excuse unless someone's, we had an occasion when someone did call in saying they're on their way, but they had an auto accident. So those kind of excuses we understand, but we purposely left the second technical assistance out so we don't have that backdoor easy way out to just come to a meeting and say I was there. So we staff strongly agree that we should have just one meeting and everybody gets the same message, and everybody should be attending that meeting as well. So that's why we changed this year's process.
And I would think that if you keep one mandatory meeting and they still have questions and they still need your support afterwards, they can call you and they can come in. And most of the nonprofits in town have been around a long time. So I understand philosophically what you're saying, but yeah, we're talking about saving some money and some time. And
Yeah, I agree with one meeting. I mean, as long as they have enough time frame. I mean, the notice gets sent out on time, and
you don't ignore them afterwards, which I know you don't.
Yeah, no, we do have, exactly, Mr. Olivares, we do have, they do have an opportunity to call us afterwards, and certainly they do, if there's questions. So it's not necessarily we're not giving them any more technical assistance, but I think that the goal is to have everybody there hear the same message. And certainly the messages we get from the committee as far as this year was certainly very strongly that we were looking at safety net programs, and so some of that needs to be said to all the participants, and we want them all there. So it makes a big difference if they all hear it at once and they can see who's applying and they want to go through the process. But the new agencies know to call us, and most of the new agencies do call us actually way before even the RFP is out, just because they're new and they want to get started or want to see if this is something worthwhile for them. So it does work out. And if it doesn't work out, we'll come back to the committee and suggest back to the old way to make the two meetings. But for now, we want to just see how it works, given our staff time and given the agency staff time as well. So
right now, the one on the November 21st is a volunteer and not mandatory then? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's a mandatory meeting.
It is mandatory?
It's the mandatory meeting.
Okay.
21st.
Just a matter of record, is part of the cost-cutting measures to have Mr. Duran show up in the middle of the meeting? I just want to put it on the record he's here.
he checked in very early, though.
He has many duties
Mr. Duran.
as assigned. That's Mr. Duran.
No, Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify, because this comes up every year. We call it a mandatory meeting because we want to get a point across that the agencies a should and must come to this meeting, but it's not a requirement to be eligible to submit a proposal. But if they do not attend, we notify the committee members, and you can take that into account as you're evaluating proposals to make recommendations for funding.
But I thought there was a requirement to submit proposal. Didn't we, to show up at the first meeting, wasn't that a requirement? If they, I mean, we've had organizations who did not, and they were excused, but...
Let me put it this way. If they do not attend the mandatory meeting, they aren't automatically disqualified from submitting a proposal.
Why are we calling it mandatory then? I mean, it could be just optional. If they need assistance, they can come and, I mean, just for my own...
Yes, your point is well taken. Maybe we should stop referring it to a mandatory meeting if it is a misnomer, meaning that they'll still be able to submit an application if they don't attend the meeting. So we'll just call it a technical assistance workshop and implore them in the notification to attend the meeting. And by not attending the meeting, it will be noted, and that information will be forwarded to the committee members.
Because most of these organizations have been, sending applications year after year.
Right.
So I understand why they may not want to come in. Okay.
They know how it works. Yeah.
I think, Mr. Ryan, you might want to revise the language and mention highly recommended.
Recommended.
Strongly recommended.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right. Very good. Next item, please.
This is an action item, Madam Chair, and
Yes.
that does require a motion.
Yeah. Would you like to?
I move forward the motion.
I'll second.
I'll take roll call. Committee members, Cornell?
Yes.
Oganessian is absent. Olivares?
Yes.
Sinanian is absent. Chair Markarian.
Yes.
Item 4B, review and approve reprogramming Club Jam fiscal year 2012-13 CDBG funds in the amount of $23,000.
And I see a report here that this Club Jam is returning the funding. Would you like to?
Sure, Madam
Review
Chair,
the-
members of the committee, I'll briefly just, for the record, review the memo. Unfortunately, one of the impacts, of course, of the HUD funding cutbacks over the last several years, which again amounts to 50% of the available funds, is that one of our longest-term agencies, Club Jam, which offers a after-school program on the west side of Glendale, I believe close to Jefferson Elementary School on Roberta, they have advised the city that they can no longer operate the program given the funding cut and given their own funding reductions in their programs, in their fundraising, that they would have to decline the funding and return the funds back to the city of Glendale. They have a program that just ended on June 15th, so their program is done, complete. We did a monitoring review of their program. There was no findings or concerns. Their finances are fine. They've invoiced us pretty much all the funds. There's nothing that we saw that was any mismanagement or anything like that. It's just part of the economics of some of the nonprofits, and they were one of our smaller nonprofits and unable to meet the requirements, so they did return the money back. And maybe they will come back down the road, but this year they are.
So they're not closing the program. They're just, returning basically.
No, they closed the program.
Close the program altogether.
Program's closed as of June 15th. I don't know if they're going to open up or operate any time. From my understanding, they don't have the funds to operate it until something comes available to them.
Yeah. So the CDBG was the only source of income for Club Jam. Is that?
Primarily, Madam Chair, it was primarily the CDBG with a contribution by the church as far as space, donations, other fundraising, but there wasn't any significant other income that would help offset any cuts. Even maybe, I don't know, even a 20% cut would maybe
And I think the
cause them.
discrepancy was $13,000 for what they requested and what we funded. So the impact of that $13,000 resulted in closing.
Yes.
And I would have hoped that they gone for other fundraising methods, maybe. But that's unfortunate, and it really breaks my heart to see that program close. Any comments?
But before I forget, I'm sorry. There was a couple of other suggestions, and I believe we had a meeting on February 28th for the. Remember, we talked about the distribution, some of the funding for the police department STAR program, and making some adjustments at the end. There was comments made, expressed by the committee at that time, that if any funds would come back, that they'd like to see some of the programs that were cut and funding shifted from one program to the other, which was the Door of Hope program and STAR program, that those programs would be backfilled and funds would come back to them so they don't receive those same type of cuts. So one of the suggestions as well was to backfill those funds with some of the funding coming back from Club Jam for the STAR program and the Door of Hope program. The other comment made during the council meeting was the decrease in funding, again, another 35% cut for Armenian Relief Society's community outreach program, which, again, just like Club Jam, has notified us that that's a very significant cut for them, for their staffing, and that caseworker that would probably be significantly reduced half-time, or possibly have to let go in the program. We would lose a significant amount of services. So the council, again, tried to make a motion to put funds back in there. There wasn't the vote numbers to make changes. However, this does allow the opportunity as well to backfill a program that is one is a safety net program and program priority, and a senior program as well, to provide funding back to a level where they can at least keep the full-time case manager for that position to provide the services for the next year. But in the options, again, we do have the consideration by the committee made last February to backfill those projects that were cut significantly, and those were the two that were the staff has looked at it that recommend some funding could go to. The remaining funds could also be provided to Armenian Relief Society. The other option is to entirely RFP the entire $23,000 to the new projects coming up in July 1st, so that they have an opportunity to request funds for those projects. That's another option. Or a third option could be any combination of two appropriations, how you want to reprogram funds. So there really is a lot of options for you. I mean, staff certainly, given the fact that we do have less staff, we certainly want to make things move smoother, and as well as make the agencies fill their gaps, because we know that the gaps that were cut certainly are beginning to impact them significantly. Even if it's $13,000 or $4,900, it is making some impacts, unfortunately, this year. So that's kind of the general recommendations from staff, and we certainly can provide information on any agencies. The agencies are here in case there's questions about how funds would be used. Again, I know that just basically to fill the gap that was closed, and they're not even at 100%. Even if funds are given back, there's still cuts, and they'll still not get 100% of those funds.
Mr. Cornell or Morris, any comments?
I saw you look at your left first, so I'll take it. I have no problem, Ms. Carrillo, with your recommendations first, especially on the first two here. However, besides the Armenian relief, I'll ask Mr. Duran this, but last time we cut by 80% the youth and family services. Senior services, I'm satisfied but not happy with it, but the youth and family services, seems to me that we need to take a look at that when we're making the distribution for the remaining here. And I'd like to ask Mr. Duran, as long as he's present. And I take it the budget was passed by council yesterday, and I wanted to see if there's any increase in funding for that program for youth and family services.
Any program.
Madam Chair, members of the CDBG Advisory Committee, the budget that was adopted by the council yesterday included a general fund program reduction for the Youth and Family Services program. The Community Services and Parks Department felt that it could absorb that reduction by consolidating the Youth and Family Services program from its current location at Heritage Gardens Park to the Pacific Park Community Center, where there is other existing staff, like the staff that operates or assists in operating the STAR program and other youth programs, where there was more staff support so that we can operate the program more efficiently. And so we're transferring the staff to the Pacific Park Community Center. That allowed us to eliminate one vacant position and one filled position. But we feel that we will be able to continue to operate at almost the same service levels as we currently do with the Youth and Family Services program. The $10,000 appropriated in CDBG funds remains intact. That's still part of the Youth and Family Services program.
Okay. That's good. Mr. Olivares?
A couple of questions. Do these recommendations today, are they subject to council approval?
Yes, Mr. Olivares, yes, they are.
Yeah, and why? Has that always been the case?
Madam Chair, members of the Advisory Committee, we do. We always send a report to City Council on any revisions to funding recommendations. What we haven't decided is if we would submit the report as a consent item or an action item.
That's where my question lies.
Yes.
Is I understand that the main recommendations every year, the recommendations subject to council approval.
Right.
My recollection, maybe I'm getting older, is not that when we make changes of this nature, they require council approval.
Correct.
So in other words, we make the decision here as to these changes, and it does not require council approval. Is that correct?
But I think it always goes to...
No, of course it has to go to council. What I'm trying to say is if we make the decision here, is it subject to then going to council and they're having their deliberations like they always do and going through the whole process again?
Yes, Madam Chair, Committee Member Olivares, the motion would be to approval of making a recommendation to the City Council. For example, if you agree with option one, then we would submit a report to City Council indicating that the CDBG Advisory Committee recommends option one and those funding recommendations, and then the Council will agree or not agree with those funding recommendations. The $23,000. This is pretty significant. What is significant about this is it's the first time in a long time that we have had an agency cancel its CDBG award. That's very rare. That hardly ever happens. And then secondly, it's a pretty big amount as it relates to social services. We're not accustomed to anything over $20,000. On occasion, we will have towards the end of the year, when we have the ability to reprogram $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000, those may not necessarily be forwarded to the City Council because of the lack of time, and typically because it's projects that are performing well and have clearly demonstrated the need for funding. In this particular case, because there was so much discussion at the council meeting and discussion about additional funding for the Armenian Relief Society, for example, and discussion about the STAR program and how we took funds away from Door of Hope. I think this would warrant a report and a final approval by the City Council. And I'll have to meet with the City Manager to see if he recommends whether we do that through a consent or an action item.
I don't disagree that there should be a report made to the City Council. I do disagree that it should be up for deliberations again, because that's why we're here. Personally, I disagree with option number 2, because I think for $23,000 to put all these agencies through a whole RFP process all over again, plus staff time, it just isn't worth it. It really isn't. I think we need to make the decision.
Yeah, and I
here.
agree with that. And I think when in February 28th, we talked about these 2 agencies, the Door of Hopes and the youth program, STAR youth program with Glendale Police. And we kind of talked about if we have enough funds, we would reallocate. And I stand by that because it was a unanimous, decision, and I think most of us agreed that these 2 organizations would receive additional funding if we had to reallocate. And for the Armenian Relief Society, I feel strong about also allocating some funds, because $23,000 is something that we can divide it up to 3. That's my opinion, and based on the meeting here and seeing all the seniors and members and with the services that they provide, I truly believe for the number of members and people that they serve, right, they would need more budget, they would need more funding. So I don't know how we're going to divide this up, but I agree. I mean, my decision would be to kind of divide up the $23,000 amongst these 3 organizations.
And I agree with you. I really have philosophically no opposition to what the staff has proposed on option 1. I really don't. These are 3 organizations we've known for a long time. One question, though, is every other organization that put in a proposal, were they informed of these available funds?
Committee Member Olivares, members of the committee, not necessarily were they informed. They were informed of the meeting, and the agenda was provided to them as far as the topics would go. There wasn't any time to get them all to be aware of the possible reallocation of funds, since we got the letter from Club Jam not more than a couple of weeks ago or so. So our recommendation is based on what happened on the last meeting from the advisory committee, which strongly suggested any funds come back that the committee would like to have a chance to allocate those funds, and that their priority would be those programs that were cut, and those programs that were cut and had to backfill those for filling their gap. In that case, Door Hope, we took funds from Door Hope for STAR, and we decided that would be, the committee decided that would be the number 1 priority. So there will be some comments, I'm sure, from the agencies as well.
And here's why I ask. And again, I was not part of the decision-making process back in February. I'm fully aware of what went on because I watched it and studied it. But when we were at the council meeting on May, whenever it was, the 3 of us.
In May.
I know our chair took a lot of heat from one particular organization that did not get funded. And it came across to all the committee members. And so if they were not informed, now we all have the responsibility as a nonprofit out there to stay on top of things. And yes, we can all say that. But if this was a group that really took a strong position in front of council on the committee's decision, and they don't know about this additional funding, I see a bit of an issue there.
Just to elaborate on that, Mr. Olivares, I think that organization did not receive funding at all, and I think I can mention it was CASP, and I feel, I don't feel good about not funding them. I really believe in their project and what they do, but given the amount of $23,000, to divide this up to maybe 4 or 5 organizations, it won't be sufficient enough, let's say, for even CASP that didn't receive any funding to operate. It would kind of be similar situation like Club Jam. If we give them $10,000 or less, they won't be able to continue the program. They need either all or nothing. I mean, that's my, that's my take on this. Either we fund them more and have them really, one of our, programs, reinstate that. Otherwise, to allocate a few $1,000s, I would not recommend that. That's just my position.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that, and again, I agree with the recommendation of staff, I do. But the basis for it is really based on the opinions heard at the council and your perceptions of the committee's discussions during the decision-making process. It did not involve listening to some of the organizations that were not funded.
Madam Chair, committee members, to do a notification, a formal notification to all of the agencies that additional funds are available for reprogramming is tantamount to just doing a new abbreviated RFP process and having them also resubmit their proposals and the reasons why they should be considered for funding. And we could still do that and go through it again and see if there's anything different from their proposals and their presentations this time, or you heard or analyzed something differently from the first time to influence you to change your recommendation. Where the first time you recommended, given everything else and weighing the merits of all the other proposals, that it wasn't possible to fund certain programs, and see if somehow things come out differently. Our recommendation was one that we felt had a rational basis in that it was based on the arguments that were made and the deliberations that were made the first time on February 28th, combined with some feedback that we received by the council on May 1st. And so this is our recommendation, but it's totally up to the committee. If you want to take more time, there's no rush. We can take more time. We can do an abbreviated RFP, or we can send out a more formal notification to the agencies and follow up and ensure that they all received the notification and have an opportunity to appear at this meeting or submit a one-page statement of interest for the reprogram funds, whatever the case might be. But we did send copies of the agenda to the agencies so that they can see that one of the action items was to review and approve reprogramming of the Club Jam funds. As you can see, some of them are here and some were not able to attend.
I do want to say that. I want to say that over the years we know these organizations. We know the job they do. STAR, Relief Society, so on. They're good. I have no problem with the recommendation. I always want to make sure that as we move through this process, that we do it as fairly as possible. That's really it. And with that, I'm willing to support this motion.
$23,000, honestly, is not a whole lot to have the entire applicants come back, and and at the end of the day, they each may receive $1,000 or not even that. It's just really, I prefer to allocate an amount that will impact the program, not just to give because they're here and we feel like we have to give. I really feel like what would that few $1,000s do for the program? So, and at this point, I think what the staff recommended for Door of Hope and the STAR program, I would go with that. And again, we also discussed that with other committee members. So I think they would also be comfortable, and it would, if they were here, it would have been, a unanimous vote, I think, because we went over this back in February. And what is the remaining funds? 14,000.
Committee Member Markarian, this is the committee. Sorry, Chair. Madam Chair, the remaining is $14,000. That's again, it's staff. One of the staff's recommendations, of course, is that if there's an agency that needs backfilling, would be the Armenian Relief Society, who received a 35% cut. And again, those numbers are based on thoroughly reviewing their budget, looking at, we can't fill it at 100%. That would basically pay for a community, a caseworker who deals with seniors and does the case management. Basically, it's what's been done for the staff person for a number of years. We are saying we don't have funds to make you whole as far as any other administrative costs. They would have to pick up those costs. This was discussed with the agency, and they are willing to pick up those costs as long as they can get the funding for that particular program. Again, it's not something that necessarily we picked out of the stars per se, or was it pressure, or was the number of people. It's just based on a service level to maintain our city, CDBG service levels for all of our agencies. If there was another agency that was cut significantly as well and didn't have a source of funds, we'd be making that same recommendation for that agency as well. But this certainly helps the city in many ways with the ESL classes, the seniors. As you mentioned, the adult healthcare system is going to be in big trouble, and it's part of our network of agencies to meet the safety net first-line programs that provide these, especially for multicultural communities. So it's more of a staff overall review versus the numbers that came out. We did look at all the other agencies and what they can do with a certain amount of money, but given the fact that Club Jam is kind of the same situation. And I know we discussed this, and I mentioned this, Mr. Olivares, a number of times at that meeting, that we really had to make cuts to agencies entirely and really focus on fully funding agencies that could adequately provide the services. And I know that means cutting agencies, but that's something that has been told to us by Department of Housing and Urban Development, saying you have too many of these small projects and they're very fragile of losing, their funding. And by and whole, we did see that happen. I didn't want to see it happen to Club Jam, which is, Mr. Olivares, one of our programs that we've always been fond of, and it certainly is. It didn't feel good about him taking back the money, but there's nothing we can do. So it is staff recommendation to look at this ARS project as one of the projects, as you may see other projects that may fit the bill as well. But this is one of the projects we feel is very important to our safety net programs for the city, and it is an agency that's been, by and beyond, done well in finances, well in numbers, and we feel comfortable with that recommendation.
We know the merits of the agency, no question. When I read your option 1 recommendation, you clearly specify the amounts that are going to be allocated from the $23,000 to STAR program and transitional housing program. And then in terms of the remaining funds, it's not really explicit as to where they should go. So I'm willing to make a motion stating that option one, indicating the funds that are going to STAR as well as to transitional housing program, and in addition to that, allocating the $14,000 to the ARS. So that would be my motion at the moment.
Well, I agree with that. I can second that.
Is that a
Is this a motion? Is this a formal motion?
You did motion. I'll second it so we can have a discussion on it here. I have no problem option 1 and also portion with the ARSC. I'd like to go pretty much of our recommendations that we made. If we did come to this end and have this discussion for the reprogramming, that we look at others that we significantly cut here. And I'm looking at, a couple that have been around that are just on a life support. And that's the legal counsel here for South Glendale, and senior services. I'd like to have one of those or two be involved say, maybe 10,000 for ARSC and maybe 4,000 for the fair housing program. Because that was drastically cut, and they're really right on life support at this time. And when they reach their quota, as far as the number of people they can serve here, someone is going to be hurt and denied due process as far as being able to know at this end, because none of them can afford to go to an attorney to be able to get legal counsel. So I'd like to see, perhaps I'd like to modify it, a penny consensus here, with ARSC 10,000 and the FAIR program adding 4,000.
I'm not comfortable with adding more to the fair housing.
Well, my position on this is the following. According to staff, everybody got an agenda report, so they are aware of this meeting. Consistently throughout the years, and I'm looking out at the audience, I know who's here. They clearly took the time to be here and make a presence, and I'm sure if we want them to speak about why they need the funds, they will, and they will tell us why. I don't see the other agencies here. We can analyze them again. We can. We spend a lot of time doing that. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do, but that's where I'm coming from. Honestly, I mean, you know, if we're all in life support, you know, where we're gonna go where the oxygen is. So.
That's a good one.
Again, there's so many agencies that if you look one by one, you know, you can reallocate some numbers, but just to do that, you know, we're just opening up all this discussion back. And by just going back to the day that, you know, the ARS came with, I don't know, 30, 40 of their members. Yes. That shows commitment and dedication from their members and what they feel about the organizations, and we want them. And
We're not going to talk about the leaders of ARS in Glendale.
We were
Yeah.
there. We were there. We know.
We know. But my motion still stands. So my motion would still be the staff's recommendations with the clarification that the remaining funds would go to ARS. They can move on and we can move on.
Yeah, I agree with you.
My motion is still the same. And I hear you, Gary, I do. But, yeah.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, just for clarification for Mr. Cornell, the Fair Housing Program does have another source of funds from the Housing Department of the city. I think we've mentioned this before. They will receive another $6,000 to make them at $15,000. That particular program is for tenant landlord services and mostly dealing with tenant issues. The other recommendation made by the committee was to assist the Neighborhood Legal Services of LA County agency with some improvement funds. And part of that requirement is for them to service Glendale, of course, residents with legal services. So you've actually made a very good recommendation in that CIP capital program to continue to have the services of legal aid here in Glendale, along with funding fair housing. So I think from staff, we do have some good resources for legal services, which would be free for those who qualify on an income basis for those programs. So we did take funding to NLS to provide that service another level.
That service is a hot requirement, right, for the CDBG to fund, I think. That's
correct. That's the HUD requirement, fair housing requirement, the fair housing program. So we've spoken to the fair housing agencies, and they're happy to get some additional oxygen in there, but they're fine, where they're at now. And again, but that's just a comment on the project itself.
With that input by Mr. Corona, I'm satisfied to that extent. I feel, Madam Chair, that we need to wind this up, because if not, this can carry on, and each segment we're getting into more of this. So I feel we need to wrap this up, and I can support the motion by Mr. Carrillo. And so if you want to call the question, I'm ready.
Okay. Do we need to?
I'll take
My
roll call.
motion stands, so is there a second?
I do have a second by Mr. Cornell.
Oh.
Okay.
Yes,
so roll call.
I second it, yes. I did second.
I'm sorry, Mr. Duran is asking if I have any speaker cards. I don't at the moment. I'm not sure if, okay, I think one is on its way.
Right on the spot.
But do you want to speak before the motion is
Is this
given?
about this item, or is that on a different item?
It's,
Okay.
it's approved. I mean, you just.
Oh, afterwards, then afterwards.
Okay.
You would have to public comment. Right.
I do have a motion by Committee Member Olivares and a second by Committee Member Cornell. I'll proceed with the roll call. Committee Members Cornell?
Yes.
Oganessian is absent. Olivares?
Yes.
Sinanian is absent. Chair Markarian?
Yes.
I do have a speaker card that I'll hand over to you.
And thank you to all who showed up, even though we didn't actually have you speak.
My name is Sona
Sona.
Zinzalian from Armenian Relief Society. Good afternoon, advisory committee members and the staff. On behalf of Armenian Relief Society clients, thank you very much to reconsider and concern about the need of the population. It happens to be, yesterday was the last day of the class, and one of the students wrote a letter. I want to read it in English. Dear Mrs. Lena, the teacher is here. At the same time, she's the case manager. We do 2 programs with that amount. On behalf of all my classmates and myself, this letter is to express our thanks, but not goodbye. They cried yesterday. They thought we're not going to have a class. To you, we are thankful to you for being so good and helpful in teaching us English. We are excellent and very careful teachers. We have learned a lot during this short time. We hope this short break will end soon and we'll meet another time in the class again as soon as possible. And then she's thanking the management so just the sake of the students and the clients, these needy people, they need a small amount of money so we can continue to help this needy. Thank you very much.
Sona.
Thank you.
Any more? That's good. Okay.
I don't have any more cards. Item 5 is other business.
I want to say again, I want to acknowledge the fact that our police department is represented. We have a group here in Stark Youth, and I know they didn't want to take the time to speak, but you guys have a good program, and so I wanted to say that.
Welcome.
Sergeant, did you want to say a few words, or? Normally, you don't come to events without saying something. I know you too well.
Well, I try not to. Madam Chair and members of the committee, Sergeant John Gilkerson from the Police Department. I have with me Officer Alex Z. It's out of my unit that STAR comes each week to the youth of southern Glendale mostly that we serve. Officer Z is one of the on-the-ground people. He's one of the alternates that works every other week with the regular officer, Blanca Aguila. She couldn't be here this week, but Officer Z and Officer Rebecca Lopez are there each week with the kids, and I get down there as often as I can. I see the effect we have on them, the positive impact. It's homework help and team building and the monthly outings that aren't always fun. Sometimes they go out and they do things that are actually service-oriented, and so it builds that spirit in them. So on behalf of the STAR program, thank you very much for reconsidering and reallocating.
Thank you.
Yes, and, not only does the program benefit the students, but we also have relationship with the families as well. So we are always in communication with the parents, and there's the meetings are always open. Parents can always come and see what the students do, and if there are any issues, we also do house visits to see and do follow up with the family as well. So this program doesn't just benefit the students, but we also try to help the families as well. And thank you again for the support.
That's great, and we know how passionate you are about this program, so we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sergeant, I had a question here, or just a follow-up. Were you able to get any concrete coordination and workshop with the Y regarding the Pell program?
As a matter of fact, yes, Committee Member Cornell, we did. We have what looks like it's going to be a pretty successful partnership if the numbers continue to build. They've been, I'm trying to think here, we have probably been at the Y since January, if memory serves correctly, approximately. Our equipment is over there, the PAL equipment that we had, the boxing ring, the bags, and all the gloves and accoutrements that are over there now. They have a coach. They're Tuesday and Thursday evenings conducting the classes. A few volunteer coaches that come in as well. Probably, the last time I saw them was YMCA Open House, I think first weekend in June. And they had a display for the open house crowd and about a dozen young people involved. Enrolled in the 20s and clicking up each day or each few weeks. So they have a regular attendance over there Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12 to 20, which is a fairly good crowd. A young lady or two involved as well. And so it looks like we're at least back to where we were at the old police facility in years past and actually surpassing that. A lot of interest. It's funny to stand there on an afternoon when we go over to mentor the kids and talk to them. And a few poke their head in the door, and the next thing you know, they're looking for paperwork to fill out. And so that was pretty consistent in the first few months over there. So to answer your question in a little less long-winded way, I think, yes, we have a good partnership with the YMCA.
I'm happy to see it. Your colleagues worked so hard over the years to develop it to the level you got it to. And then to see, then of course the transfer to the Y and so on. So I'm happy to see or hear the results from you, that it's still intact and going, and that's a good thing right there.
Yes, sir, it is. These things come from a lot farther back than my tenure here at the police department, so I'm glad to be a part of them and help perpetuate them for as long as we can.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you.
Item 6 is public communications. I don't have any cards. Item 7 is adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.